Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willis, your host. Good morning, Houston. Good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. Good morning to the entire world receiving our signals via the magic of El Internet, formerly known as ARPANET. Created by whom? Created by we, the people. Let's repeat it. Created by whom? Created by we, the people. Anyway, folks, we are going to have a great program for you today. But before we get started, let's get busy in el estudio con el señor Jack Van Bever and the one and only Mayana. I was about to get a little bit. Who's in the studio again? How you guys are doing this morning?
Oh, Howard's in the studio by spirit.
We're doing good. We're doing good.
Good. Anyway, how are my best people doing?
Well,
just thinking of like the weekend and worried about the weather because I wasn't even aware it was going to be bad. So that's about it.
It's going to be cold. Actually, the real cold come on Sunday night.
Hopefully nothing turns off. That's my big thing.
Yeah.
Really?
I hate that.
I hope so too. Anyway, what's going on, guys?
So I was going to do the topics covered on the show today. So this program opens with the hard truth. Accountability remains optional for the powerful unless the public insists otherwise. At the January 6th hearings, Jasmine Crockett dismantles Republican evasions and lays out the case that Trump lost, knew it, and still incited violence. Jamie Raskin sets the constitutional stakes with moral clarity. Then the lens widens to healthcare, where congressional hearings reveal insurers attempting to redirect blame from soaring costs while families pay the price. The connective tissue is power, and who is forced to answer for its abuses.
Yes. Got a lot to talk about today, but But Jack, what's up, my brother? Anything from you?
Yeah, I've got a little kind of tribute to MLK. Okay, this is an observation from a humanist about the life of Jesus Christ and Dr. Martin Luther King. First, I don't see Jesus as a Messiah. I see civil disobedience by turning over the money changers' tables. This landed him in hot water with the Roman Empire. Pontius Pilate knew how dangerous an activist was and how it threatened the authority of Rome. So Pontius Pilate had him put to death by crucifixion. His death, he told his disciples, before his death, he told his disciples his knowledge that power would seek to destroy him as a consequence of his actions. Just as Dr. Martin Luther King told the people his knowledge of his impending destruction for speaking out against the Vietnam War. King was assassinated by the powers that be because he challenged the immoral lies of the military-industrial complex. And the one thing they fear is the truth and what the people will do with the truth. I've seen corporate power use government to crucify many Christ-like beings we call activists, whistleblowers, Daniel Ellsberg, Chelsea Bradley Manning, Frank Serpico, Karen Silkworth, Julian Assange, Leonard Peltier, Edward Snowden, the list goes on. All activists who risked life and well-being as mortal Christ-like beings and worthy of our love and admiration, and call for the rest of humankind to advocate for their release from crucifixion, for they still pray for us from the other side for our release from the bondage of tyranny.
I
Deep
love
thoughts.
that. I love not only deep thoughts, true thoughts. Sometimes all we do is deep thinking. How do we apply that to reality? How do we apply that to history? Love that, Jack. Great piece, great
Yeah.
piece. Anyway, folks,
Thank you. Thank you.
we have a lot to talk about. Anyhow, I'm about to get into my coughing spell, but I won't. Welcome aboard. I'm going to start today with the one and only Lisa Blair out of Atlanta, Georgia. First one on the chat today. We also have Harry Denson out of Missouri City, Texas. Harry, thank you for being here every morning. We also have Willis Kelwood, Sandra, M. Hope, Marge KJ. How you doing, Marge? Alexandra Barcos. Anyway, welcome aboard, folks. And remember, I didn't get the first few dozen on Substack. If you want to be called out, please feel free to just go ahead and give me your city and state. Anyway, folks, we are going to have a great show for you. Thank you all for being here. That's what we do here. That's what we do here. Anyhow, what are we going to talk about? As Mayana said, we're going to first start with that hearing that we had yesterday. And let me just tell you that I cannot express how disappointed I was in the hearing. And there's a reason why, right? When you listen to that hearing, you saw reality versus fantasy. But my question really is, do you really believe that those Republicans that were speaking up in defense of Donald Trump, those that have been speaking, do you think they believe what they're saying? I'm curious in the chat. Do you think they do believe what they're saying? I am pretty sure they don't. Reyes Nunez, good morning as well, Reyes Nunez. Thank you for being here. And David Page Ye is here from New York. He says he's a longtime fan. Thank you, my brother. Thank you so kindly for that. I want to play the how Raskin started his, beforehand. It's funny. Yesterday on my 3 o'clock show, I played a couple of clips from the hearing. And one of my right wing listeners, regulars, he said, "Why don't you play the other side as well?" I pointed out that I am very respectful of the airwaves. And I think part of that respect is not giving false duality. Part of that respect is not giving false equivalencies. And when you play absolute lies on air as a host that has control of what you are going to place on air, you are part of the problem. Like I explained to him, when I put lies, etc., on videos of that sort of stuff from these charlatanes, I do it as a method of education, but not a method of just giving folks free time. I am not going to give validity to something that is an absolute lie. Now, when we have opinions that we can go back and forth, that is all right. But we will not give a platform to liars. That's why when certain people call on the phone, people say, well, how come some right wingers you give opportunities to and some you don't? Well, the right wingers that are bringing opinions, etc., I don't have a problem with. But if you are trying to use our airwaves, if you're trying to disrespect our airwaves, that which belongs to all of us, by just methodically using it to misinform, ill-inform, disinform, and cause harm, you can't do it here. At all, at all, at all. Anyhow, let me play Jamie Raskin. I love that guy. When he came to Houston about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I went and spoke to him a bit, and I'm trying to get an interview set up with him. But anyhow, let's go ahead and play how he started yesterday.
The good chairman started by saying it's all about the politics. Well, maybe for them, but for us, it's all about the rule of law and who's going to stand by the rule of law and who's going to oppose it. Now, Mr. Smith, you're one of America's great Prosecutors. For nearly 3 decades, you worked for justice under both Republicans and Democrats. The Manhattan DA office, where you prosecuted sex crimes and domestic violence cases. The Eastern District of New York, where you prosecuted murderers, rapists, gangbangers, and other violent criminals. Leading the public integrity section. At the Department of Justice, you brought prosecutions against corrupt public officials across the political spectrum. When you went to The Hague as chief prosecutor in the Kosovo trial, you prosecuted war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated against thousands of innocent victims. While others may have devoted their lives to corrupt self-enrichment, you have devoted your life to the rule of law and to public service. You've never been prosecuted for anything. You've never been convicted of anything. As far as I can tell, you've never even been the subject of a disciplinary proceeding over the course of your multi-decade career. But Donald Trump says you're a criminal and you belong in prison. He says you belong in prison, not because you did anything wrong, mind you, but because you did everything right. You pursued the facts, you followed the law, you stuck with extreme caution to every rule of professional responsibility. You had the audacity to do your job. Everybody here knows what you did wrong in Donald Trump's eyes and why he says you belong in prison. You found, and I quote from your sworn testimony before the committee, you found proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. When asked whether you believe the evidence was enough to obtain a criminal conviction against Donald Trump at trial, you had a one-word answer: yes. When asked if Donald Trump was responsible for the violence that took place at the Capitol on January 6th, you said, our view of the evidence was that he caused it and that he exploited it and that it was foreseeable to him. You found that Trump knew he had lost the election. How? Well, his own Attorney General, William Barr, repeatedly told him so and described all of Trump's theories as BS. Trump's top campaign advisors told him he lost the election. Vice President Pence told him he lost the election. More than 60 federal, state, and court decisions, including 8 rendered by judges he appointed to the bench, rejected every outlandish election fraud and corruption claim that he made. Trump himself even privately acknowledged it, gesturing to Joe Biden on TV and saying, quote, "Can you believe I lost to that effing guy?" He knew he lost, but he threw everything into his big lie, which some people, even in this room to this day, will stand by and swear by. Well, when the big lie wasn't enough to convince officials like Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, to commit election fraud and just fine Trump 11,780 votes, when it wasn't enough to convince Trump's DOJ to, quote, just call the election corrupt and leave the rest to me and the House Republicans, when it wasn't enough to force Vice President Mike Pence to announce and then exercise lawless powers to reject Electoral College votes and use counterfeit slates to anoint Trump the winner, that's when Trump incited mass violence on January 6th. While more than 140 officers were being brutally assaulted by Trump's mob, while rioters beat them with flagpoles and sprayed them with chemical agents and crushed them in doorways, and while they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and chased the vice president out of the Capitol, Trump and his team worked the phones, calling not the National Guard, which was under the direct unilateral control of Donald Trump, but calling members of Congress, urging them to delay certification and to nullify the election results. Special Counsel Smith, you pursued the facts. You followed every applicable law, ethics rule, and DOJ regulation. Your decisions were reviewed by the Public Integrity Section. You acted based solely on the facts, the opposite of Donald Trump, who now has purported to take over the Department of Justice. He's in charge of the whole thing under his unitary executive theory, and he acts openly, purely based on political vendetta and motives of personal revenge, and he doesn't deny it. Our colleagues have complained about the special counsel's review of toll records, which are phone records like a phone bill, showing only the timing and duration of calls and containing no content, no substance whatsoever from the calls. But those records were lawfully subpoenaed because Donald Trump made members of Congress relevant to the investigation. It was Trump who chose to call them to advance his criminal scheme. As you testified, Mr. Smith, if Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have gotten toll records for them too. I trust our colleagues get the point because America certainly gets the point. There is much Mr. Smith still can't talk about, though we know he badly wants to. His investigation developed what he calls powerful evidence that Trump stole documents containing our country's most sensitive secrets, hoarded them in the ballrooms and the bathrooms of his well-trafficked Mar-a-Lago social club. He showed them off to visitors. And then he obstructed a federal investigation by instructing his attorney to pluck out anything really bad before turning materials over to the FBI and having his staff delete incriminating security tape footage. But today we're not going to hear a lot about that because you are gagged by an absurd judicial order rendered faithfully by Trump's most servile and sycophantic appointee to the federal bench, Judge Eileen Cannon. This order not only blocks release of Volume 2 of your report, which is unprecedented, about the classified document scam, it also gags you from discussing the report or its contents with us, with America. And so we don't know what's in it, but it must be pretty devastating because Donald Trump is desperate to keep Mr. Smith or any other DOJ official for all time from ever releasing it to Congress and to the American people. Now, Mr. Smith, if any of our colleagues foolishly choose to attack you and vilify you today, and I know that's not going to happen from some serious prosecutors over there like Mr. Knott and Mr. Schmidt, who understand what federal prosecutors do and what the rule of law means. But if anybody decides to attack you personally, they will only be revealing their own ignorance of what prosecutors do and their own indifference to what the rule of law requires in America. They will only be stroking the wounded ego of a lawless, twice impeached, convicted felon president who not only unleashed a mob against Congress and his own vice president, but is now pardoned and released into our communities hundreds of extremists, insurrectionists, and cop-beating felons who have proceeded to commit dozens more crimes against the American people since they were pardoned. Mr. Smith, I understand you are a long-distance marathon runner. I read that you're a triathlete who's done more than 100 triathlons and 9 Ironman competitions. You are in the fight for justice and the rule of law for the long distance, for the long haul, and I thank you for that. And we should all try to follow your example. America looks forward to your testimony today.
I thought that was one of the best openings to a hearing on January 6th to date. When I heard that I figured I've got to cut that out because what he did is he set the stage. He points out a lot of things that, the way these Congress people chop and cut the speaker off, he was able to lay the foundation. And I think he did a great job of that. Before I go any further, let's go ahead and get Moses, who's on line 1. Moses, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, good morning, buenos dias, mito.
Buenos dias, amiguita. Talk to me.
Okay, I am called to, to give great kudos to Jack this morning. Jack, you found it, the demystification of the Bible. All of this, Christ was brought up the virgin birth and all this nonsense. The demystification of the Bible, you found it. It is only the greatest history book, the owner's manual of life on earth. and the troubleshooting guide, so we could discern between what is good and what is evil. And when you talked about Jesus, he was nothing more. He was no mystical being. He was nothing more than the greatest activist of what I would say justice. That is all he was. And we saw, as you aptly described, we saw who he was fighting against. And take this and place it against what is going on today. We see who Jesus is and who the Romans are. Thank you, Jack. You found it, the demystification of the Bible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Moses. We know Jack does a demystification of quite a bit of stuff. His insightful writing is just doing its thing, what it needs to do. Anything else you want to add, Moses, before I continue?
And again, I listened to that speech. Oh my, America, if at this point you all still do not understand what just happened to y'all, America, if you don't understand after listening to that speech, after the speaker gave it to you line by line of things that you have seen and heard and now are feeling, I don't know what else.
There's nothing else.
Well, you know,
Thank
I mean,
you, Miss Moses.
Before I continue. Go ahead, Jack. Okay, we're hitting the delay. Anyway, thank you very much for that, Moses. Thank you very much for that, Moses. And yes, I concur 100% with what Moses just said about Jack. But likewise, I want to point out that Moses ended with, if you've listened to Donald Trump's speech, if you've listened to Mark Carney's, the Prime Minister of Canada's speech, and you will find that we are today in a new place. And unfortunately, if you listen to mainstream media and mainstream media only, you have not seen the cataclysmic event that occurred because of Trump beginning. I mean, it's been on the slow grind for a while. But what that, in chemistry, right? A catalyst is something that speeds up a reaction, that makes a reaction goes more efficiently, etc. So you can use permanganese dioxide to pull a lot of oxygen out of a mixture of sugar and let's say sawdust or whatever. I remember I almost blew my head off one time trying to build. I was using sugar. Sugar has a lot of oxygen. I using sugar and some dust from the shop. Had all the sawdust. I was building a rocket, and I kept on doing a little bit more research and found out that throwing some permanganese dioxide in there would actually act like a catalyst. So went ahead, not knowing proportions, and mixed up that stuff, put it into a spray can. The spray can is like a precursor to a rocket, right? Put it in a spray can, put a little wick in it, and I lit that sucker. And that thing flew up a little bit and then blew up. Foolish me put some sulfur in there too. I don't know what I was thinking of when I put sulfur as one of the active ingredients in there as well. And almost died. Well, activists are the catalysts to make things happen. There are good activists and there are bad activists. Anybody that's activating. What Donald Trump did is he became a catalyst with his speech in Davos. And knowing what that speech was likely to be, another activist took leadership, and he went to Davos a whole week before and was working the lanes. When I said, I don't remember if I said it on my show yesterday, but I did say it on the 3:00 show yesterday, was that Mark Carney made himself the moral leader of a new order. I want any one of you who get a chance to listen to the entire, I think it's 30-something minute speech by Carney, because that speech is one that will go down in history, giving people the not only the necessity, but the information or the what should I say, the permission to decouple as best they can from the United States of America. And if I were not an American, if I were from some other country, or again, being a citizen of some other country, that is one of the first things that I would be doing, and that is the decoupling from America, because America has proven to the rest of the world it's no longer a reliable, dependable country. And that is not anti American, that is just reality. And the truth of the matter is, having an America under Donald Trump, we need other countries that are sensible, because we, the Americans, are going to need those sensible countries that have values to go to as this country deteriorates, if we don't get to put a stop to it. Now, one of my goals, of course, with our activism here is to put a stop to it. But part of that stop will require foreign countries to decouple, because some of us have to see the pain before we react. And when other countries decouple and we are no longer the financial center of the world, which we've been losing for several decades now, that is when things start to happen. And that is when we as a country can have what's called the rebirth. Because right now, folks, we are in desperate need of a rebirth. Glenn, Ryan, I see you in there. The rebirth start with progressives taking hold of this country, but it requires a lot of work, not just talk. And the work that I see our women doing, not just here in Kingwood, but throughout this country, the ones that are picking up the bull by the horn and say, we are going to do something. The ones that are not cowering like a bunch of punks that you saw yesterday in that hearing. The ones that are not trying to say or revise history like Neil from Houston. He's from, I think he's from Fort Bend County. Neil's from Fort Bend County, who attempted to rewrite history and say that what happened to the cops really isn't the fault of Donald Trump and his thugs, but somehow the fault of the actual cops' leadership. These half men, I think that may be too much. These 1/8 of men that cannot stand up for our country. That is where we're at. That is where we are at. Anyway, folks, continuing. Yesterday, Congressman Swalwell, he really pointed out something about his Republican counterparts and how they say one thing behind Trump's back and the other when Trump is listening. I want you to listen to this, then we'll take it on the other side.
Everything right. Harry Dunn, Danny Hodges, Sergeant Cannell, Mike Fanone, they did everything right. These guys, my Republican colleagues, are a joke. They're wrong. History will harshly judge them. So I want you to lean in today. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You did everything right, sir. And these guys are so lucky they're not under oath, because they would have to tell you what they really think of Trump. They call him crooked. They call him cruel. They call him a scumbag. I've heard you all say it. You're lucky you're not under Trump, but when the lights go on and the cameras are on, you're tiny, you're small, you shrink. Everyone remembers Matt Gaetz coming over here after a committee hearing. He would laugh at how stupid he thought Trump was. This is all a show. And Mr. Smith, you're just the latest act that they've brought in. But they can't erase what happened on January 6th because we saw it with our own eyes. Mr. Smith, after the mainstream media called the race for Biden about a week after the election, did Donald Trump concede the election?
He did not.
The next month, the Electoral College met in every state and voted Biden as the winner. Did Donald Trump concede then?
He did not.
Shortly after that, the last court case that Donald Trump brought was thrown out. Did he convene then?
No.
Is it your judgment then that only Donald Trump could have convened the mob in the size that it was assembled on January 6th?
Our assessment of the evidence is that he is the person most responsible for what happened on January 6th. He caused what happened. It was foreseeable to him. And then when it happened, he tried to exploit it in furtherance of the conspiracy.
And you actually obtained indictments from a grand jury, right? You went to a grand jury and did something that the Trump administration has not been able to do as they go after their enemies. Their cases are being thrown out. You obtained criminal indictments against the president. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Smith, do you know who Edward Loya is?
I'm sorry?
Edward Loya, L-O-Y-A?
I believe Mr. Loya worked at the public integrity section when I was
Did you know that he said of you, when it comes to investigating allegations of sophisticated federal criminal matters, Jack Smith is the gold standard? Do you know who Mr. James McGovern is?
Yes, he was a prosecutor I worked with in New York.
Did you know that he said of you, I have no idea what Mr. Smith's political beliefs are because he's completely apolitical? So are you a registered independent?
I have no partisan loyalties. I don't know if I'm registered as independent or not registered at all.
Are you glad you accepted Attorney General Garland's request to be a special prosecutor, even though you've been dragged over political barbed wire and your family has been subjected to death threats?
I don't regret it.
Do you remember where you were on September 11th?
I do.
What did you think of that day?
I was in Brooklyn when that happened. I was at the command center that night. I worked on that investigation. I remember pretty clearly.
Do you remember where you were on January 6th?
On January 6th, I was living in Europe working for the State Department seconded to a war crimes tribunal.
What did you think as you watched on television what happened at the Capitol that day?
To be honest with you, I don't recall if I saw it that day or a later day because of the time period.
What did you think when you saw it?
I was shocked. I was shocked by it. I obviously, being in Europe and not following things as closely, I was not, frankly, up to speed on the events leading up to it.
What shocked you about it?
I just never seen anything like that happen in our country.
Mr. Smith, I don't know if I'll ever have the honor to talk to you again. If I don't, please know that I and my colleagues on the Democratic side, and even my Republican colleagues when they speak privately, have nothing but respect and appreciation for what you tried to do and how you did it.
And that is so true. This guy really did it. This guy really worked. You know, if we had watched what the rest of the world watched on January 6th in any other country, the reporting in this country would be about not only disorder, but about the lack of democracy. And we would have hit it out of the park reporting what we saw on January 6th. And especially being led by the exiting president of the United States. And then now, with this major cover-up that we're doing, do you know how we would be reporting about this issue if it weren't in America? If it were in, quote unquote, some banana republic? We would be talking about sending in the United States military to restore democracy. Donald Trump didn't even want to send in the National Guard to ensure the safety of his vice president and the safety of every single American living in the United States. He didn't even want to do that. We can't let these people forget the thuggery, the treasonous behavior that they had. And anyone, we have to let it be known, anyone supporting this, they don't love America. It's not about love America. It's about loving your ideology more than anything else. And we're not going to fall for that. And as usual, we can always count on Jasmine Crockett to be plain and to lay out the land.
Thank you so much for showing up, because this was something that you wanted to do. The Republicans wanted to make sure that you were hid in a room with no cameras, because I was there. They didn't really want you out public because they were afraid of what you would say, which is that you could have proven your case because you are a career prosecutor who knows how to prosecute criminals. So just to be clear, today, it seems like the Republicans have not really fought very much about whether or not Trump was guilty or not. In fact, their fight seems to be over whether or not you were authorized to prove their guilt. Do you recall a number of Republican members asking about whether or not your appointment was okay, even though we know that you've testified about the more than 100-year precedent that allowed for your appointment?
I was asked questions about that today, and our position, as we filed in our appeal, is that there was strong support for my appointment, including Supreme Court precedent directly on point.
Thank you so much. Additionally, everybody's been all gingerly here today, but I don't know why we're acting surprised that a man who had close to 90 allegations out of 4 different jurisdictions and ultimately ended up with 34 convictions after a jury was able to hear all the evidence would possibly be committing a criminal act on January 6th. In fact, considering the fact that we are now under the impression that he is violating people's due process rights, he is ignoring court orders, he's starting wars without congressional authority in contradiction to the Constitution. He's enriching himself to the tune of over $1.4 billion. He's shaking down electeds to draw maps that will help him stay in power because the Republicans don't understand that they swore an oath to the Constitution and that we are supposed to do checks and balances. He's also shaking down TV stations to get money. So why are we trying to pretend as if it is out of the realm for this particular man to commit the crime that he committed on January 6th, and frankly, the only reason he ran for president was to make sure that he would not be prosecuted, because I fully believe that you would have put him under the jail based on our long-form conversation that we had. But according to your special counsel report on page 137, it states the department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution. And that, quote, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. In other words, Donald Trump ran for president, like I said, so he wouldn't have to spend the rest of his life in prison. The chairman and other members of this committee have spent all day attacking you and trying to rewrite the history of January 6th. But Mr. Jim Jordan, the chairman, failed to mention how he was running around the Capitol terrified by the possibility that all those insurrectionists would harm him. In fact, on page 97 of the deposition transcript, you mentioned how Mark Meadows, the president's chief of staff, quote unquote, never saw Jim Jordan so scared. The chairman also failed to mention that he was in direct contact with the White House in the days leading up to and on January 6th, which is why his toll records were subpoenaed by your office. Let me be clear, because they're trying to act like this is Democrats on Republicans, and I guess you are a covert Democrat that knew that he was going to try to steal an election before he tried to steal that election, and so therefore you were somehow put into place. I mean, the conspiracy theories make your head spin, but nevertheless, were you going to subpoena the toll records of every single Republican simply because they were a Republican?
No, we subpoenaed the toll records in the course of this investigation because they were relevant to our investigation.
Relevant? Oh, okay. All right, so that means something about facts. So let's talk about facts. Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, yes or no?
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, 60 federal and state courts have found that there was no evidence of election fraud. Trump's own attorney general and vice president knew that he lost the election, but he still tried to steal the election by pressuring state officials, designing fake elector plans, nearly having Mike Pence hanged, and ultimately demanding that his supporters, quote, fight like hell, correct?
Correct.
We all saw it happen once they reached We all saw what happened once they reached the U.S. Capitol. As your report outlines, President Trump knew that he would incite violence at the Capitol that day. In fact, some of Trump's senior advisors were pushing for violence. For example, page 81 of the report details how co-conspirators number 2, John Eastman, tried to convince Mike Pence to break the law, stating that, quote, violence was necessary. So it isn't just Trump who is responsible for the death of multiple law enforcement officers and the injuries of thousands of people. A lot of Republican members of Congress are also responsible. 147 Republicans voted to overturn the 2020 election results, including multiple members currently serving on this committee, and I will yield.
Could anyone have nailed it that concisely? I don't think so. Betty's on line 1. Come on in, Betty.
Okay, stay warm. On Jesus, he knew the cost, but he did it anyway. His mom knew. She was so proud of him. Mary was. Here we go with Trump. Trump and ICE in America, he's gone beyond limitations. The ICE guy that blew away Mrs. Good in Minnesota, he does not have to answer. What kind of thing is that? Also in other countries, Trump could save lives. It's not in him. This is how I see him. On his hands and knees, crawling in the graveyards and howling at the moon. He's gone mad. Love y'all.
Love you, Betty. Yes, he is mad. According to Jack Van Beva says, a psychologist labeled Trump after the January 6th insurrection a social psychopath with an erratic attraction to violence. Yikes. Putting erratic and violence in the same phrase. Ugh. Okay. Anyway, folks, do you all know that Trump has formed? They don't quite advertise it that way, and I didn't see it a whole lot on TV, though they mentioned it some. An alternate UN made up of different countries, and being on the board, of course, you're paying $1 billion. But anyway, based on reports from January 2026, Donald Trump has launched a board of peace that he chairs, designed to operate alongside or potentially challenge the United Nations, particularly regarding conflict resolution in the Middle East. What is a board of peace? Launched in Davos, Switzerland in January 2026, this initiative is described as an invitation-only body to handle global conflicts, starting with the Gaza ceasefire. Really? Is it a personal UN? Critics and reports suggest that board acts as a parallel structure intended to sidestep the UN Security Council. Trump indicated it might replace the UN, which he has criticized as being ineffective. What's the structure and leadership of this organization? Trump chairs the board indefinitely. It includes key figures like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Wow. Yeah, I think Los Gatos in Madrid is right. It's a scam. And who participates? While dozens of countries were invited and some, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, have joined, major Western allies have been cautious or reluctant. Russia is reported joining. If all you Western countries and others listen to Brother Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, stay the hell away. The initiative has raised alarms about undermining the established international rules-based order, with the concerns that it lacks transparency and operates based on personal authority rather than international law. Again, watch how Donald Trump is operating, right? Slowly putting ice on the turf, increasing their power more and more, getting Americans used to watching people in fatigues and gear beat up fellow citizens, because I know they want to let you believe we're just going after immigrants. But you see, in America, we have a lot of blended families: Canadian mother, American father, Nigerian father, American mother. And in that scenario, in order to get hold of those houses or whatever, they jump in and they just do a blanket arrest of these folks and then lock them up for a while. What are they doing? What are they doing? They want you to be scared to do anything that they think you believe would infuriate the viewer. And it is the new form of voter suppression. What do you think is going to happen in Chicago, in Houston, in LA, in New York City? What are you think are going to happen in every single one of those big cities with humongous voter turnout? They are going to try to suppress the vote by making people scared to go vote. So you may look a little Somali. Yeah, we are not going to show up to vote because I don't want to be bothered. I'm only one vote. I don't want to be bothered because I may just get thrown into one of their holding tanks and lose everything. So why bother? Why bother? Because it is existential, folk. They are going to try everything to disrupt the election because Trump needs more time to consolidate power. And he's not just consolidating power for Trump. This is a consolidation of power for a sect. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. They're doing it perfectly, nicely, and slowly. Bezos buys the Washington Post, the most important purported progressive paper. And now you have them writing op-eds against people that are doing good things. An op-ed you would have never seen in the Washington Post before. They buy the Times and the LA Times. They're buying up the stations. TikTok is now owned by Ellison in some form or fashion. Ellison is about to own a lot of outlets, if you will. Measures of look, this is a Powell memo on steroids. And can we stop it? The question is, can we stop it? And the answer is simple. Yes. But what it will require are not only women doing the job, but men, you've got to step up and get away from the peer pressure, thinking that being a certain way is a must. You got to save your country. You have to help the women save this damn country. You know, you have a few solid men like Raskin, like Swalwell, like Brother Maxwell out of Florida, young kid out of Florida, like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is always there. Bernie is always there. Bernie is my hero. But more men, guys, you've got to step up because you are cowering to a paper tiger who wants to be a Führer. You got to wake up. Bruce, line number 2. And by the way, folks, the number is 713-526-5738. Again, the number is 713-526-5738. My brother Bruce, talk to me.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Alberto, can you hear me? Okay, I'll be very fast. I have a fantasy. Ted Cruz has a Hispanic last name. He was born in Canada and his dad is Cuban. I'd love to see ICE bust the window of his car and drag him out, demanding proof of citizenship. I'm done. Bye.
Thank you very much for that, Bruce. That is so true, right? Let me tell you, Cubans have been in recent times voting Republican not realizing that they are part of the backstop that the white nationalists needed to get where they are today. And now that they believe they're close to critical mass, they don't mind offending the Cubans, and they're getting rid of the Cubans as well in Florida. And it is funny because TikTok has all these parodies because there were a lot of Cuban bands out there making salsa music. Oh, nosotros queremos a Trump. Nosotros queremos a Trump, and all these other salsa songs they're making for promoting Trump. And now you can find them crying. Oh my God, I can't believe Trump deported my mother. I came here illegally, but he said he was only getting rid of the criminals. I am not a criminal. Well, didn't we tell you so? Didn't we tell you what this whole movement is about? The MAGA movement is a white nationalist movement. It's not like we didn't know that. It's not like we didn't tell you that. I mean, let me be clear here. There are a lot of MAGA that don't realize what movement they're in. Now, if you're MAGA listening to me, and I've told you this, and you can go validate and research what I'm telling you, and you remain a MAGA, that speaks about you. That says that's exactly who you are. I have a few of them in my chat that, they've been with Politics Done Right long enough to know that what the policies that they're going for, the persons that they're supporting, they understand what it is now. And they're still in here defending it. I'm not having coffee with those. Hell no. I'm not having coffee with those. You know what? That's a sort of a off thing to just say, I say I'll have coffee with anybody. I have coffee with people. At that point, you're no longer a person. Come on in, Derek, line number 1. Let's go to Brother Derek.
Hey, good morning. It's very important to say this, but I know that every time you look at the television, you only see white men in masks with ice. But no, don't be fooled, brothers and sisters. They have Hispanic and black people that also working with ICE. They're not showing their faces, but they're there. And I want to make sure, do not sleep on this, because you got traitors and bigotries and all kinds of madness that rolls up into that. That's a blending pot. That's all I call to say, bro.
Thank you for that, Derek. That is so true, and I think I don't think I've mentioned what Derek said enough. I think we need to point that out. The cancer that is, first of all, I am glad that Derek said that, because I have always spoken as how stupid race is, and also that race is a tool. White supremacy hurts white people more than anybody else. So it's an ideology. And what Bruce gives me the opportunity to talk about is to let you know that, a couple of times on my 3 o'clock program, I reminded folks that the worst beaten by cops in this country wasn't Rodney King. The worst beaten by cops was a guy who was killed, murdered by 4 black officers holding up white supremacy in Memphis, Tennessee. Okay? So let's not, pigmentation has little to do with honor. Thank you for that, Derek. You nailed it. All right?
Thank you.
Take care, brother. So, folks. So remember, it's never a racial thing. Race is a tool of control. And the interesting thing is that white supremacy hurts white people the most. Please visit Appalachia. Please visit. My daughter was in shock as she did. And white supremacy hides these people that they're extracting from. Hide these people that don't fit the profile, that don't fit the bill, as they expose the ghettos and the barrios. That is one of the reasons that I've always said, when we unite the barrios, the ghettos, and Appalachia, a stereotypical term and not a very accurate term, but a descriptive term, that's when we win the race. Studio, I'm calling on to you ahora.
Hey, Egberto, here's a question. How did the Christians become indoctrinated to the right to be the largest group of constituents to elect Trump, who represents the values not of Christianity, but that of anti-Christianity? The Powell Memo.
The Powell Memo is the genesis, and the actual enforcer was the moral majority. Look up the moral majority back in the days. I can't remember the name of the leader. His son is now was the president of Liberty University until his sex scandal a few years ago. But yes, you're right. The Powell Memo, enforced by the moral majority, where they changed their colors. Mayana, you got anything to add?
No, I'm just gonna check out the Powell Memo and the moral majority.
All right, and Jerry Falwell was the leader. Thank you. I got the smartest damn listeners. Thank you for that, Don. Jerry Falwell was the name I couldn't remember, and his son was the one in the sex scandal with his wife and a young guy that they bought $1 million mansion for. It's amazing how these people get around. Anyway, we're at the end of the program. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your ears, your eyes, and everything else. Love you all from the depths of my heart. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. The rest of the show. Write me directly at kpft@politicsdoneright.com. kpft@politicsdoneright.com. Love you all. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out.